Hey there, and welcome back to the Fuse Show. I'm one of your hosts, David Tran, and today I'm joined by Ashwin Rajeeva. He's the CTO and co-founder of Acceldata, a data observability company that helps data-driven enterprises achieve excellence, innovation, agility, and return on data investment. Thanks for joining us on the show, Ashwin.
Hey David, thanks for inviting me, and I'm happy to be here.
So what led you to want to build Acceldata? How did you first come across your co-founders, and what led you to realize this is the opportunity you want to pursue?
Yeah, so all of our co-founders, we have four co-founders, and we all worked in a company called Hortonworks before this. I was an architect over there, and our CEO Rohit Chaudhary, he works out of the Bay Area. He was the director of engineering, and we were building a product called Data Plane in those days for Hortonworks. And that was all about how workloads are moving to the cloud. So you have certain data workloads on your on-prem data center, and you have some things on the cloud. And how do you provide a common service kind of layer on top of a hybrid architecture like this, right? While building this, we kind of realized that even though you had companies invest in millions of dollars into data and data technology itself, a lot of them are struggling with the same old problems, right? So operability is one. Finding talent to actually get value out of your data systems is another. And the third thing is that these stacks tend to get so complicated that when something goes wrong, you really don't know what's going on. So we thought it would be interesting if we can figure out a way where we bring concepts of monitoring, observability, which are kind of almost a given in the application architecture, microservices kind of world, and bring the same set of technologies to from a data practitioner's perspective, right? Think of data scientists, think of data engineers, and how do you build observability for the needs of this audience? And that led us to kind of look at the platform we were working on at that time. That was, Hadoop, essentially, right? Hortonworks and Cloudera build Hadoop platforms. And we kind of started looking at all the customers who had implemented Hadoop in their environments and asking them about, hey, what are the challenges? Why are you not able to operate this at scale? Why are you not able to get your money's worth? And we came around the same set of problems. It's all around operability, visibility, finding out root cause analysis. Why is my data not in the place where it's supposed to be? The quality is not supposed to be. My data pipelines are not working. So we started working on a solution around it, and we've not looked back ever since.
How common is the problem of things not working as they should? Like you mentioned data pipelines where the data end result wasn't where it was expected or the quality wasn't right. Is that an extremely common problem in larger enterprises?
Yeah, at least from all the companies we've spoken to in the last 3.5 years we've been doing this, there's a common trend, right? So what ends up happening is that there is a general overarching theme, which is of what you would say digital transformation, right? And there's multiple initiatives under this theme. One of the initiatives for any large company is essentially centralize all your data, pump in all the data for analysis, and then run use cases on top of it. And these might be around ad hoc analysis, streaming analysis, machine learning use cases. You could think about any modern data use case and all of it apply. And then they run into the same set of problems. Number one, which is how do you actually put together a stack which works for a company, right? So you as an implementer might choose Snowflake plus Tableau plus S3 plus Airflow. Somebody else, a telecom company would say, oh, my files are actually on an FTP server. I need to move them to some on-prem, and then I need to move them to S3. Then I'll run Hadoop data lake. So what we have noticed is that it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You use a lot of open source or on-cloud or on-core technologies and put them together, right? Like building like a Lego structure. And then you need very specific monitoring tools to go look at, what's happening inside Kafka, what's happening inside Snowflake. Why are my costs so high? There's different tuning parameters for every piece of that technology. So what we've seen is that, you might find experts in one area, right? You might know someone who's good at Kafka. You might have the talent for it. But usually, when systems become complicated, they become extremely complex. Then complexity, by definition, creeps in, and the complexity in some cases is so high that things, when they stop working, you usually don't know at what
I
point
see.
they've broken, and that's where we come in, right? So we provide what we've thought of, and our company talks about multidimensional observability. What that means is you you take a holistic view to it, and you look at the computer infrastructure pieces, you look at the data, and you look at the orchestration, and you try to figure out, you build enough connectors and enough capability to pull in data from all these different aspects and try to pinpoint where exactly that problem happens.
So, what was the MVP that you built, and how long did the MVP take?
That's a great question. So, for an enterprise startup, it's really hard, right? So, if you had let's say you are building a Zapier of some sort, right? It's easier in the sense you usually have some notion of what people want, right? You're building something for Instagram, you're building a CRM, you're building another ticketing solution because I don't know, Jira is not working or it's broken, right? But for a pure tech solution like ours, it's always hard because you need let's say 10 lighthouse customers to work with you and tell you what is the right set of features which you can bake into your MVP, and you need the MVP to go get these 10 customers. So when we started, our first customer was actually GE, right? And the way that came about is that when we were with Hortonworks, we knew the GE team, and we knew that they were facing a very specific problem.
Sorry, what is
On a
GE?
company, General Electric,
Okay, okay.
Digital. Yeah. Yeah. So they had bought a product at that time for OLAP on Hadoop. And within 3 months of them buying this, Oracle went and acquired the company, right? And then they stopped support because the Oracle support is just too expensive. So they had like zero visibility into what this platform was doing, right? We knew that it was built on top of open source Spark. It was called Sparkline. But the company, they had implemented this, GE had implemented this, they had no idea how to actually work with it. So we went in and we said, okay, we are an observability company, and we can help you with this. And we have connectors for a bunch of different technology stacks. But in this case, for this specific technology called Sparkline, we're going to build a connector custom for you, right? So that's how it started. So we kind of extended our Spark connector to work with Sparkline, right? Went into the guts of that, debugging and some reverse engineering, figuring out what it was actually doing, where the log files were, try to pull in some information and stitch together some sort of a screen and a debugging solution around that technology. And that kind of helped us bootstrap, right? So that got us the fact that GE Digital was the first customer, right? And when we quickly moved on to another large customer, there's a company in India called PhonePe. PhonePe is the largest payments broker in India, right? It's owned by Walmart. And even there, it was, just very quickly building a solution to work with a very large edge-based kind of a cluster. So these two initial deals for us kind of, made sure that we have a solid kind of initial set of lighthouse customers who gave us some feedback, helped us build our product, and also helped us kind of, go into the market and say, hey, we build the solution, we have revenue, we have solid customers, and then now we are looking for, capital to kind of take it to the next stage.
Do you remember how long that first project with GE and PhonePe took?
So it was not really a project. So I remember that, I quit. So those days I was actually living in Germany, and I decided to come back because our CEO Rohit had to move to the US. So I had to come back to India to kind of lead this team and bootstrap the India operations. And I think it took three of us about 3 months to get the initial kind of structure going, initial solution going, including writing the deployment scripts and then, pushing it into the customer's environment. So I would say 3 to 4 months to get the first version going.
And then from there, what feedback did you get that helped you understand what you want to build as a more generalizable solution for other companies as well?
Yeah, so more often than not, what happens is that when you work with a large customer, right, a large company, and then usually you would get involved in one or two groups, right? You go to a team which is kind of implementing something, and then you say, okay, we're bringing this vendor in, and once kind of the good news spreads, you have other groups kind of asking around, hey, can we use this for this use case? We also have trouble in this other aspect, right? So that helped us in the initial days. That a lot of feature requests came in from the customers themselves, right? And they helped us put out some very critical features in the beginning. For example, we built an alerting feature into our product in which you could actually alert on about 4,800 odd metrics. So that was kind of a request from the customer where they said that, hey, New Relic is good, right? We have New Relic, but the alerting functionality is purely based on certain metrics that they pull from, let's say, a JMS, right? Can you provide something better? So the first few customers, what we call the lighthouse customers, they gave us a lot of feedback, right? On the good, on the bad, on stability, on everything, on every single aspect of it. And so that helped us build a feature set, especially the on-prem version of our product, which we call Pulse On-Prem, was almost completely built with customer feedback, right? So we didn't even have a product manager for about 2 years because we were in customer calls for a while. We were talking to a lot of customers, building the company, hiring people. We never had the time to kind of build a product team. So what we ended up doing, is just building the initial version of the product purely from customer feedback and our own kind of intuition from working in the data field for a while, and that helped us for the first year and a half, where we kind of took the same offering to many customers.
That's definitely the ideal situation. You get to save money on having no PM, and customers generally know exactly what they want, especially in their very beginning. So
yeah, and also I think if you take a specific let's say niche technology, I wouldn't say it's niche, but think about data technology. Right, the market for talent is fierce, right? So a good PM or a good PM leader is almost impossible to find. So for us in the early days, I think because none of us was from a product background, it was kind of harder for us to also go and now look for a leader. Given that we have a limited amount of time, customers talking to us, giving us feedback, expecting product, and also trying to fundraise at the same time. So it was almost impossible for us to go get a product leader at that time. So we kind of said, okay, we'll wait till we have some more traction, and go get product at that time. But we just work with customers. For the first year, I think all we have done is taken customer feedback and build product around it. We didn't even think, what was important to the market, observability market in general. So we just said customers, product, deployments. That's pretty much was our life for the first year.
Something I find really interesting in talking to CTOs of companies that sell a very technical solution is the fact that their involvement in sales is really different from CTOs of, call it less, I imagine for most users do not even know the CTO of Instagram or Facebook, but they for sure know if you're in a technical space and the technology is the reason the business exists and the reason consumers use the business, I imagine you're a lot more involved in those sales conversations. Can you tell me about what that was like throughout the life cycle of your time there?
Yeah, I think it's a necessity. What ends up happening is the initial conversations around product are because you built a certain set of features with certain assumptions in it, right? You could, if you have a single kind of pointed product, and let's assume something simple, Instagram post scheduler, right? There is only maybe 3 ways to build this product, right? You can, and the way you think about it is that what's the easiest way to use it, and that guides everything from the technology decision to how you build it to, whom you hire. But in our case, it's a little different. You go into a company like Oracle. Oracle is a customer of ours. They have hundreds of initiatives just around their data space, right? You go in and you say, hey, I built this product, this around the observability space. You usually get, an hour with the CDO or VP of data platforms, and you say, hey, you have this data lake, you probably have these problems, and I have this solution. The answer to that usually is that, hey, this is great. I like this product. I know that you have these 10 features, but I need these 4 more, right? And this is what's gonna really make the deal happen. And you go to the larger kind of customers you want to get into, and you really want to solve the use cases. Everywhere you find 1, 2 more things that you need to do, and you need someone who can understand those technical problems which they are trying to solve, right? So, for example, the second customer we onboarded, PhonePe was kind of in a hyper growth curve, right? And their mandate was, how do you take a 70 node kind of OLTP cluster built on top of HBase, and in the next 1 year we want to go to 1,100, right? Can your solution scale? Right now you say, okay, it can handle 100 nodes, but we are going to go to 1,100. How do you make sure that it actually scales? So I think in these sort of companies, enterprise focused or tech focused companies, at least in the early days, the CTO or VP of product or VP of engineering tends to get much more involved in customer conversations, because you don't have enough senior people, let's say, who can actually talk to a lot of this customers. So a CTO is more like, it's kind of a product plus tech plus functional role, where you go in, talk to the customers, kind of figure out how you could implement it, right? Play the role of an architect as well. And then also kind of, think about saying no, right? You go to a customer and he says, if you do this, I'm going to give you a 3-year contract. But you realize that if you kind of do this, then your entire company is just going to be doing this for the next 1 year, right? So also learn to say no. And some of these calls are quite technical. So you need an experienced kind of old hand at tech to do it, at least in the domain you're working in.
Do you remember how many hours you roughly spent, call it, for the first 10 customers with a CTO on the other side, or a head of engineering or product on the other side, before they converted and signed a deal? Or at least give an informal yes?
Yeah, I mean, it truly varies. What we have seen is that the greater the pain, the easier it is to convert, right? In some places we have seen, that there's such a big fire that they are willing to pitch their tent to anybody who's ready to help them, right? And a lot of companies, especially in the startup world, the way it operates is that you get into a customer call, and then either your solution fits or doesn't fit, right? There's a lot of companies these days where they are hyper focused on that one thing that they want to do, right? Our DNA is a little bit different, right? We are still focused on one thing. We are a data observability company. We're focused on data engines and data observability. But I'm always super interested in knowing, what people are actually building, right? It's impossible to do it sitting in, a corner somewhere. You probably, 1 out of 10 CTOs or CEOs actually, I think, is an expert at that field, right? And the others are kind of, they're building the company. They're also learning what they can do and trying to figure out a formula. What is the best combination to bring this product into market? So I'm always super interested in talking to customers. So we've had a customer in a large telco company in Thailand, we spoke to, and the whole thing was on fire. So we said, hey, if you guys can actually spend, initial 1 week to just help us figure it out and then fix it, and then, implement your product, whatever you think is the best case. And this was a case where, it happens a lot of times. You buy a big piece of technology, you think that your people can implement it, but it turns out that you don't have the right skill set. And maybe in that geography, you don't have the right talent as well, right? So this is one of the use cases. And on the other hand, I've even spent 2-3 weeks with, calls 2 hours each, maybe spaced to 2 days, every 2 days trying to, find what the pain point is, because the customer says that, yeah, there is a pain point, but we also need to see how it applies to us. So, keep discussing it and then come to a conclusion that unless we do a lot of custom solutioning around it, we can't really build it. And then, propose something like, hey, do you have a, SI partner we can work with? And if none of it works, and if it just is, too kind of, you need too many people doing it, then we just say no. So it truly varies.
As you scale up, how do you continue to find companies, or how do you identify companies that you think would be a good fit for your solution? Like, how do you know the ones who are having the house on fire, metaphorically speaking, today?
Yeah, so that's a stroke of luck, I would say. So the at least in the initial days, a lot of the sales were top down, right? So we knew through our network and through the salespeople we've hired that there are certain companies which have these issues in them, and then we kind of pitch it, and if it fits, then it kind of works out. But as we grow, I think there's a strategy is shifting a little bit. So I believe that at least for on-prem data lakes right now, Acceldata Pulse is the best solution, right? And there are only a few competitors in this field, and I think objectively, if you compare, we are probably the best solution. So for on-prem data lakes, we are kind of riding on that, right? We have shown success. We have revenue coming in from customers, multi-year contracts from like marquee enterprises like Oracle, PhonePe, Walmart, DBS Bank, True Digital Telecom, TrueCorp. So we kind of riding on that success and trying to get as much business as we can from that. On the other hand, I think what most of our companies right now concentrated on is to build observability for a little bit more modern cloud-oriented data stack, right? So we are now trying to go and figure out if you are implementing Snowflake, then what really ails you, right? If you are on Databricks, then what are the issues that which come in, and how can we actually bring some benefit to the customers? How is it, how can we make a difference? And whether that's from a cost saving perspective or a performance optimization perspective, I think so we are on this journey to figure that out. And a lot of our kind of customer motion right now is to figure out these use cases in the cloud. So we've finally hired a product team with a head of products, coming in from Data Robot, and they're trying to figure out what is the right way to go to these customers. So we have both approaches. We have a kind of a top-down approach where we go and try to find these large customers who already have like a large data lake where there are issues and they're figuring it out. On the other hand, we are also trying to look at a more product-led motion around modern data stacks and cloud-based platforms.
Since the solution is so technical, are you involved with the marketing side of the business as well?
Not as much as I would like to be, but the feedback at least I've gotten from the marketing team is that the whole development or R&D team needs to be more involved because they're not able to, especially talk about the solution in a way which connects with the practitioner, right? And I think that's critical. So I'm not able to spend that much time, but I think to answer to the broader question is, I think yes, whenever I think you have a fairly technical problem and you have marketers who are trying to figure out, okay, how do you position this, how do you sell this, and how do you attract customers? I think either the CTO or there should be a role which acts as a bridge between kind of marketing and R&D and where that thought is going.
Can you walk me through a typical day of CTO at your company?
So these days it's a lot of calls, but so I think we start off in the morning. Usually, it's either a review call for the work we have been doing, or it's usually some sort of a planning call, right? Building a product, especially in this space, on the cloud, then you have to kind of plan your path to release, right? So you're thinking about, let's say we want to release this in 6 months. There's things around compliance and SOC 2 and all of these things to do. So a lot of time in the morning goes into planning some of those things. Usually in the afternoons, it's around, doing code reviews, architecture reviews, and things like that. Say about 3 or 4 hours in the afternoon to spend with the team, spend some time, figuring out progress and unblocking people. What I've observed is that in a lot of teams, a lot of good technical people get stuck on taking decisions, right? So they usually think, okay, this is the requirement. Maybe this is how I build it. Maybe, or there's option 2, which is faster, but might be a little buggy, might not work in these cases, and so. So I think an important job of a senior technical architect / CTO is to take these decisions, right? So in a day, maybe 2 or 3 hours is just figuring out, taking these decisions and working with the team through that path, right? What to prioritize, what to deprioritize, what optimizations to make, and what shortcuts to take to get there. And if you have taken a lot of shortcuts, then which kind of technical debts to serve right now and which ones to serve later. A lot of time goes into this, and then maybe a small break in the evening, and then calls with marketing and product strategy and things like that in the evening to work with more or less our counterparts in the US.
How large is the engineering department today?
We are close to 68 people right now. Most of us are based out of India, right? So our company started out right here in Bangalore before our CEO decided to move in. So a lot of us are based here in Bangalore. We closed our Series B about 3 to 4 months back, I think. And now we are planning to set up an R&D team in the US as well. So that would be around 20 people to begin with. I think by kind of Q1 next year, we're looking at a R&D team of about 90 to 100 strong.
And what is it like to manage either directly or indirectly that many people?
From a personal perspective, it's been hard for me purely because I don't come from a people management or team management sort of background, right? So I'm a programmer first and foremost, and an architect, and I enjoy the best thing I can do is get a problem, spend a lot of time on it, thinking about it, coding some sort of initial implementation, and then handing it over to a team to kind of flesh it out a little bit more. So it's been a learning experience for me. And I think what I've learned is that people actually, what matters most is people, right? And how you actually manage that team. Because you realize that you can't do it all yourself, no matter how hard, how capable you think you are. Or I think it's true for everybody, unless you're like a genius, right? Most people have limits that they hit, right? And to learn to realize that limit and kind of figure out what works best for you is important. So in my case, what we have done is that we have bought an old mentor of ours on board. His name is Gaj. He was working with Google. He was a general manager at Hortonworks, and then he moved on to Google Search. And I essentially told him that, hey, I need help. Right? I need some mentorship, and he's agreed to come on board as VP of engineering and help me scale in my own way. So I can learn to also manage a little bit of a larger team and learn the nuances of managing it, because that becomes a critical piece of how fast you can actually scale. Right? It's all about the people. The software, it gets built, right? But I think the people which build it and how to actually make them, help them achieve the best outcome in their own, careers, the reason why they join the company, I think it's critical.
What are some things you've been learning as a leader of people?
Yeah, so I think the current market for developers, right, it's a bit crazy. So if you think about it, you have companies who are willing to pay much ahead of the baseline, and most of the work is not so interesting, in my opinion, right? So, you know, if you think of a typical startup, right, not all of the work is super technical, and you don't need, everybody doesn't need to be genius. So you have a bunch of people who are extremely in demand, and there are companies who are extremely well funded, and the work is kind of similar everywhere, right? Wherever you go, microservices and React JS and Angular JS, it's similar. It's very difficult as a candidate for you to kind of discern which is a good company or not. So the environment which you create for your people is super important, right? So what you need to give people is, and the way you present your company to prospective employers and people, is that you need to kind of tie it somehow to their own ambitions in their careers, right? And whether it is, and so in simpler terms, to give them something meaningful to do. And now, if you think about it, right, we are building a data observability company. How do you translate this concept that you're building a data observability company into something meaningful to a person who has probably 10 choices? One company is doing data observability, other person is reinventing CRM, third guy is reinventing decentralizing finance or whatever. So you have the hard problem of actually translating what you do, and why is it impactful, and why is it meaningful, and why should you spend the next few years of your life actually working with us? That is probably the key learning, that people value what they do, and you have to learn to kind of create that meaning for them in their daily life. So when they come into work, they should feel like they're a part of something, and that is not just purely about product or what you're doing, right? You can't say I need a passionate data engineer. That won't work. So you also need to create an environment where they feel valued, right? And the work is valued. Learning to first deprogram myself in terms of that, code, and so product is important, but it's, the team is also the people who are around it kind of contributing to it, their ambitions, and how do you kind of give them an environment where they can do a good job is what I've been learning, and I think that's kind of miles to go.
At what point did that shift start to happen in your mind?
I think once we crossed the first 10 people, right? And so what happened was that the initial set of people we got were largely friends whom we know from other companies, and then there's a natural connection, right? So if I'm asking an old colleague of mine, friend of mine, we have mutual respect for each other, and they see that I'm doing something, I'm passionate about it, so they kind of are willing to take a bet because they know me, right? And there's a lot of our early people came in from Hortonworks and other companies that we worked with, either friends of Rohit or Agus or mine, and we kind of started working together. And there's also kind of mutual trust built in between us. So easier to work with them, easier to convey information, easier to delegate, easier to even let's say review code and merge PRs. It's just easier when you know the group. So, but once you start bringing people from outside, the first question they ask you is that why should in not in the exact same terms, but what's on their mind is that why should I choose you? Right. And that's a question I think everybody who's hiring should answer. And it's harder for a founder because you are directly involved in that. You are intimately connected to the mission itself. Right? So if you are, let's say, a senior manager in a largest company, why should we join you means something different, right? It means, we have benefits, we already have a great market, we are Microsoft, you know us, everybody knows us, and that's why you should join us. Whereas in no-name unknown company, right, it's a more emotional pitch that you need to make. And people have the filter that they can actually, they can figure out if you're not being honest about it, right? If you're not being honest about it. So to kind of make that you have that understanding for yourself, I think you need to kind of get that realization. And that's, I think, once we started getting people outside the comfort zone of friends and, colleagues and, former, uh, bosses or reportees, is when you start to think seriously about what the company means to you, what should it mean for other people, and what is it that I can promise? Should I promise an exit in 5 years? Or are we saying that, hey, we're going to build the next Microsoft, so you got to hang around for the next 20 years?
So when you're starting to look for the first engineers outside of your personal and your team's network, how did you start searching? And how did you like personally go in front of all of them to like pitch the company? Like how did you go about that process?
Yeah, so I think I've spoken to almost all the first 50 people, right? And it's important for two reasons. One is the same thing I told you. We believe all of our, the founders who kind of agree that this sort of things takes time to build.
Yeah.
And it, you can take any successful company outside of the few outliers, even companies like Snowflake, Confluent, have taken around 8 years and some even more, right? So we are in no tearing hurry to kind of, build an exit, sort of a motion. And in the initial days, when people started, so to your first question, how do you find them? I think, you got to crawl through LinkedIn and GitHub and ask friends if they know somebody else who you think might be a good addition to the team. And so and we also kind of hired a recruitment firm and early recruiters and gave them, what's the kind of people we are looking at. But I think the first 20, 25 people, they're critical. So I used to go in front of everybody, and after all the technical interviews were done, I used to just answer questions, right? So my interviews are more like, hey, you've spoken to you've done the technical work now, and now I'm here to answer your questions, right? So this is an early stage company, we're seed funded, you have hundreds of options. So you can ask me essentially anything, right? And so people start asking about, what is my vision, right? Where do I want to take it? Do we plan to sell the company? How will data observability pan out? How will you compete? What if Amazon starts building the exact product that you're building? Right? All sort of questions, right? And even things like, okay, and then COVID hit. So a lot of questions were around, financial stability, because that's an important aspect. You read startups firing people left, right, and center, and then you think, okay, should I even join a startup at this time, or should I just go with an established company? So I spoke to almost everybody first, at least the first 40 people for sure, and if not more. And I still continue to speak to every candidate, unless they're in departments like marketing, etc. Because I think other people can do a better job. But at least for the technical hires, I try to meet each one of them and again, get onto a call, talk a little bit about a company, talk a little bit about the successes we've had, and then kind of have an open 30-minute discussion where they can ask me questions around and kind of figure out for themselves whether I'm being honest about what I feel about it.
So just like how candidates have multiple choices when they're looking for employers, I feel like employers also usually have a lot of choices as well. What do you look for when you look for like engineering talent?
Yeah, so one of the things I'm really particular about is that for me, I think the path to success or to achieving anything material, right, which you can point out, it could be anything. It could be financial, it could be meaning at work, is as important as the goal itself, right? So one of the rules which we have in the company is that nobody is in simpler words is that be nice, right? That's what we say, and there's no micromanaging. So once the technical evaluation is done, speaking purely from an R&D perspective, I think one filter I have is that I don't want people to come in with a huge kind of ego, right? And we generally understand that fine, it's going to be a large part of your life, and you're going to be working hard hours, but that's not everything, right? That doesn't define who you are. So especially in the technical world, I've seen that people tend to equate their technical abilities to intelligence somehow, right? To superiority or over others, and that translates. You've seen, huge problem with women in tech, huge problem of people fighting over simple things, and, terms like bike shedding and all kinds of issues, right? And you can't have a decent technical discussion without other people kind of shitting on you. So that's the filter which at least I look for, because I have a team which can do the technical evaluation, right? They give a technical program and then people try to solve it. There are 2 or 3 rounds you have to go through. All that is good, and I can find. But one of the biggest filters I have is that, can you manage yourself in the right way, which includes working with people who are not like you, right? Who might not be as quick as you in implementing something, or even might be better than you. Basically, can you operate in that environment successfully? And the second thing is that, do you at least think long term? So anything in life comes from long term thinking, right? Financial, health, any of it, right? You can think you have to invest a certain amount of time in it. Even this podcast, right? You've been doing it for a while, trying to build this audience, and you have to do it for a long enough time so that you can build something out of it. And that's the mindset you need to have. You don't join a startup saying, "Hey, this company is funded. I'm going to go here, take a big salary. After 3 months, I'm going to go there and ask for a bigger salary." Right? So I don't want people like that. So trying to avoid this, it causes issues around, hyperscaling is all about how many people do you have now? How much did you scale to next month? It's harder when, there are pressures around it, but I think those are the 2 filters which I tend to apply when it comes to just people. Because the technical part, I think there are people who can take care of it.
The ability to think and the affinity to think long term is one of the things I also really value when I like to work with people, because I want to make sure that not only am I investing like resources like money, but it's, I think, more so like the time as well as like the team. Like the culture of the team is a function of the people on the team, and over time, like the founders lose the ability to like control the culture because it just becomes whatever the team makes it. So it's always gonna be like somewhat close to what the founders had in mind, but I imagine over time it drifts slightly. Do you think about the piece? What are some of the pieces of your culture that you would like to see preserved as your company like goes through hyperscaling?
I think we've been successful in, till now, having a kind of a non-shouting, non-micromanagement kind of team. So I would like to preserve that, right? What happens is, as you scale, you feel the need for, putting controls in place, and these can take various forms, right? Some companies have a huge issue with micromanagement. Some of them are kind of what we call top heavy, right? So you hire a bunch of senior directors and senior managers, and then you kind of drive everything through it. So what we've tried to do is to be very careful of hiring leaders, right? And making sure that we don't put in extra layers where they're not required. So we are bringing in kind of management, but it's kind of slow, and it's on purpose, because what ends up happening is that if you get an experienced person or a leader, and you get them from whatever the background is, they tend to come in with their what they've learned, right? So if you bring in someone from, let's say, Amazon, they're bringing some aspect of the Amazon culture. You bring in someone from Microsoft, and now you imagine a startup which brings one from Amazon, one senior person from Microsoft, one from Google, and one from a company like Oracle, and then put them all in one room, and nobody can agree on what the way to operate should be. So what we want to do is to have that DNA where we take the time to figure out how to keep a bunch of people motivated enough, and not frustrate them as we quickly go from 20 people to 100 people. So the way at least we have planned it out is that we have hired a lot of people on the tech side, on the marketing side, but we are very careful on hiring the management layer, right? So we kind of do extra due diligence there, speak, all the founders and senior people speak multiple times, and we are like brutally honest about the situation of the company, the market, and where we think that we can go, right? And beyond that, I think, like you said, if there are people who have a long-term view, then hopefully they'll come and join us and help us build the company, right? So the way I see it is that as long as people join and they think that this is a group of interesting or smart people working together for some outcome, that's good. And if people come in and say, hey, I can join now, and maybe there's a Series C, 3 months, 6 months down the line, then I get so much, outcome out of it, and then, I get promoted quickly because it's a startup. I think that kind of spoils the mood, right? So we are very careful about it.
So when you look for leaders as you scale a company, what are the traits that you look for in leaders that you want within your company?
I think the number one thing would be, and this is also a trait of a lot of successful companies, is that leaders who come in, I think they should be able to operate it independently as if it was their own small organization, right? What ends up happening a lot of times, and I'm not sure if you run into this in your own career, is that you hire someone whom you think is an expert at something, right? You might be an architect or a program manager or, I don't know, scrum master or a marketing person. And then you realize that every single decision is still, you have to make it because the person you hired is not able to kind of operate independently, right? So I think the number one trait is that you get in someone who essentially is now operating it at in their own function or their own group, almost independently, and taking almost all decisions independently, while keeping in mind the larger context. Right. So that's number one. And number two, as I said, a big problem in technical organizations, from my own experience, is the massive ego of people. Right. So one filter which I always apply is that you can have opinions and you can have ideas, but we don't want someone to come in and then bring in such a strong opinion on how things should be done that you just disrupt everything, right? So I think a combination of a person being able to take responsibility and operate independently while having kind of a good head on shoulders, egoless kind of approach is what we are looking for. And of course, the rest of it, credentials that you've worked in a company and you have delivered products, all given, right? You put out a resume and you say, hey, I'm looking for someone who is delivered. Well, you get, 10 people. But your job is to kind of narrow that down to that one or two people who will fit in your org, while the rest might be perfectly capable of fitting in other organizations, right? It's fine. So you're looking for what fits for you. Not as much as, who is the best, right? Who's the best who can work with you is what you're looking for. It's kind of like dating.
Well, I've really enjoyed this past hour. I feel like you had a lot of insights to share. And I just had one last question. Where do you see tech startups arising and going in the next 5 years?
That's I think, great question. A lot of it, I think there is no aspect of business, I would say, which startups can't disrupt now, right? So new ways of doing things, like this whole, in our industry, a lot of momentum is driven by workloads moving to the cloud. So 10 years back, you had a business system and you had an ETL developer and you had a reporting developer, and they would pump in some data and do some batch reports, and the CXO executive gets a report once in a while. That was the whole thing. And now it's more like, you want to buy a car, you want to get credit, it's actually hitting a data lake, it's almost on near real time, it's front end center, it's being driven through Snowflake, which you're sending your data to another company's data center, and then you're running all this ad hoc analysis. So a lot of it's driven through that in our organization. But if you look at other aspects, right, whether it's healthcare or transportation, logistics, insurance, fintech. In India, there's a fintech explosion, right? We probably right now have the most advanced payment systems. If you want to pay for something, there are 10 ways to pay in India, right? And you can do all of it on the phone. My father, earlier to pay an electricity bill, he had to actually go to a place, and now there are 5 apps on which you could get your gas and pay your electricity, buy mutual funds or whatever. And it, one step further is all these motions around Web3, right? Decentralization, through techniques like blockchain, crypto, right? And so many terms which it's kind of hard to keep track of. So I think tech is going to disrupt everything, but a lot of it is also hype, right? I know you've seen this before, right? So there was big data, there was blockchain, there was like VR, right? VR companies. I think there was a company in Florida which got $500 million and then magically, which didn't give anything. So you have, companies are going to be created in every field, but I'm very optimistic that a lot of them will actually solve real problems, right? And solve something, especially around, Web3, at least the material says so, but will there be a good confluence of common sense, company building, which at least has a long view of the horizon, or it kind of all crashes and burns in the next 3 to 5 years? Some parts of it, not all of it, something to be seen. But I think if you are an entrepreneur today, I think this is the best time, right? You can pick any industry. You can go out, if you're in the Bay Area, head out just for a walk around some industrial area, and just see what's going on, and you see a business process and you say, hey, this looks a little bit slow, right? And you can provide a solution for it, and chances are that you will get capital and talented people willing to join you and work towards it. Best time to be an entrepreneur, actually.
Well, I'd love to give you the stage now. For people who want to follow you along personally or follow your company along, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, so I'm not really good at social media.
Me neither.
So that, but but I'm learning. So the best place I think is either a LinkedIn profile, Acceldata, the Acceldata LinkedIn page. We push in a lot of information through there, especially on things which we are working on, and customer use cases that we've solved, and people who have joined us, and even things like company culture and our thoughts around it. Our website is a good resource. We have a lot of case studies there, and we are trying to publish a little bit more consumable content in videos and things like that. So I think that would be the best place. Personally, I'm trying to put something together to at least put my thoughts in a central place. So I should hopefully have something in the next year. We have now enough people so that I have a little bit of time to talk about things I'm interested in. So hopefully by next year, I'll have some sort of a social media handle where I talk about things that you're interested in.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I look forward to it. And thanks for joining us in the show.
Hey, thanks, David. Thanks a lot, for inviting me. And I'm happy to talk more on more interesting questions whenever you want. Thank you.